it's visible.
Okay, perfect. So as Professor Kaushik said, I'll be covering some of these additional points related to the systematic literature review. And these are some of the concepts that you could use in as part of the SLR or the meta-analysis that you are trying to work on. So the agenda that I will be covering as part of the additional points or additional topics would be related to SLR search and review. In search, I'll be typically looking into what is a systematic search, though we have looked into various aspects associated with it. I will quickly look into some of the keywords and how do we make use of an intelligent search, rather, I may put it this way. How do we establish the search terms, the different criteria and conditions when we are doing a search? So search is a very important thing. When I talk about intelligent search, it's not simply writing something on a Google Scholar and you get an output. So there is an intelligence to be built in as part of this as well. Again, when you are quoting your search criteria in any of the good papers, they would definitely look into how you have defined your Boolean logic for searching, what kind of keywords have you used, how did you use them. So I'll be focusing only from that perspective for the search. What would be the different criteria in order to assess the quality terms? Like we looked into the systematic approach in order to identify the topics for the SLR or meta-analysis. In that, how do we ensure that there are certain rigor criteria built into when we are searching and identifying the research papers? How do we qualify them to be of good quality? How do we ensure that the ones which does not follow those good quality are not included as part of the study? Now, the key condition here is that whatever logic that you're using as part of it need to be specified clearly whenever you're writing a paper and submitting to the journals. This identifies a very key criteria for acceptance of the paper in any of the good journals. Now, what I talk about the good journals could be an ABDC journal, could be an ABS journal, could be FT 10, FT 50 or FT 1000 journals. It could be even those which do not fall under any of these criteria, but they are beyond these journals as well. So when we talk about good journals, they are the good journals which look for these quality assessment criteria and other aspects of how the criteria has been used with respect to the different aspects being used as part of the SLR, as well as which leads to the meta-analysis. Can I use the same as part of my research PhD thesis or any of the research papers? Yes, that could be used in for. But my focus here will be more towards about the SLR and the meta-analysis criteria that we have seen yesterday with respect to the Prisma approach and the other approaches. Now, the next comes in about the review aspect. Whenever there are more than one researchers working on, say, for example, an SLR or meta-analysis, how do you ensure that, again, the rigor is being established between the two? When I talk about two means it could be two or more, it could be 2, 3, 4, 5. So anything more than one is what identifies with respect to this. So I'll talk some of the concepts here very briefly, because I will be focusing only from the point of view of what is required in SLR, but there are very key considerations when it comes into the quality research, and I do have a quality related paper that I published in one of the ABDC journals as well. Now, going back into a very brief with respect to the Prisma approach that we looked into on Saturday and Sunday, what Dr. Jaspreet as well as Dr. Pooja covered in fall. I'll do a quick recap so that we all are on the same page. We looked into the procedure for systematic review by making use of the Prisma approach, which covers 4 different categories. So what does it start with is identification, screening, eligibility, and then the various inclusion criteria. What we get is the final result with respect to how many papers needs to be included as part of the study. The first, what we looked into was the extracting the data using certain criteria in order to span the existing material in a practical screen for literature review. Now, when we talk about this practical screen, is nothing but the criteria that we use in for inclusion and exclusion. So what is the protocol that we are using in? And that's what has to be included specifically before even we start with any of the work. The next would come in about the different databases used. There are many. Some of them has been identified, discussed by both Dr. Pooja as well as by Dr. Jaspreet. I will quickly, very briefly touch base on this, but my focus will be more on the Boolean search. There were few questions with respect to manual search as well. So here I will briefly discuss about in order to give you clarity on whether this could be used or not. Then what we looked into was removal of duplication of records. So if you're using multiple databases, they could definitely be the papers which are appearing in multiple places, or that needs to be removed in. And what we arrive is in those figures of the number of papers which needs to be reviewed. And in this kind of review process, what we look for is the title and the abstract in order to identify the scoping, whether it should be included as part of my study or not. At this stage, the key important aspect is to establish the rigor. So when there are multiple authors or multiple researchers working on a particular and contributing towards working on a particular SLR or meta-analysis, this is one of the key important aspects. So how the content analysis is done, how the codification is done, how do multiple people work together cohesively. There are various aspects. One is in order to I won't go into too much of details about the qualitative aspects, but what I will cover here is, as I said, primarily from the point of view of SLR and meta-analysis, in order to ensure that the results which are being produced is quite unison, and there are no conflicts with respect to, when you talk about conflicts, is primarily from the point of view of content analysis part. There are some measures as well with respect to identifying for this. I will be touching base on Cohen's Kappa. Then comes about the full text articles which are then assessed for eligibility. Again, here we can have various categorization for inclusion and exclusion, and these content codes from the previous step can be used in here again in order to have the qualifications of the research papers. And then we come into the final total studies. When the final total studies are arrived in, we also look in from the point of view of what I would emphasize is on synthesis. It's not simply getting the number of papers and then using the tool and then you're getting in the results. The synthesis of these literatures is of high importance whenever you're looking in for getting these kind of papers being published in quality journals, as well as if in order to have, for example, if there are any of the research scholars in this session today, if you want to include it as part of your PhD thesis, then you need to provide a quality PhD thesis by making use of synthesis of these literatures as part of your SLR or meta-analysis. And this is where the key importance would be. Moving on further, I'll start with very basics of what the various Boolean operators that we use, or, and not. You would have studied this as part of your schooling. This starts with very schooling aspects of what the Venn diagrams are. So I'll be making use of Venn diagram to visually demonstrate with respect to what these Boolean operators and how do we use them. Then I'll get into the next levels. If I'm using some logic here with respect to what I need to search using a search criteria, I'll focus more from the point of view of what we need to do. I will take two different keywords. Say I want to use mobile payments. Everybody understands what mobile payments is. We all use mobile, as well as we use a mobile phone or a smartphone in order to make payments, be it micro payments or to transfer money across. So I make use of these two keywords in order to explain, but they could have more sophistication and complications associated with when you have multiple keywords to be searched in for. So start with the very basic with respect to the mobile payment. So the first circle, what it represents here is mobile, and the second is payments, since we are using two keywords here. What is the meaning of or, and not is what I will explain it. So if you look in what is ORing, it is nothing but when we have two mobile end payments, the one which is common across both of these categories or the kind of results that we get. For example, if you search everything related to mobile as well as I search everything related to payments. So a combination of these two is what would be an ORing. So I can use mobile or payments, the results I'll get is a combination of this. Moving on further, what is ANDing is, it is only those which are common across the results of both. For example, if I do mobile, there would be certain research papers that I would get which will also include payments. Similarly, there could be various results if I search on payments, it should also include mobile. So an ANDing will nothing be an intersection of these two is what will be represented here when we use an AND. I will also quickly demonstrate to you when using a simple one, say in a Google Scholar, in order to get the results in. And this is one of the very key critical aspects when we do an intelligent search is what I would call in for. The next is not. So when the first one represents, say, the mobile, and the second one represents payment. So if you want to have all the results of using mobile, not payments. So what would happen is anything that you find in the white circle, this will be removed off. The one which is colored is what will be representing the number of papers related to mobile, not payments. I hope that's clear to everyone with respect to what we are talking with respect to very basics on the Boolean operators that we commonly use for as OR, and not. And I will be using all these three in order to demonstrate it quickly in order to see what kind of results we get. And I will use the same example of mobile and payments, but you could use any of them and expand it to any levels of what has been demonstrated in the past couple of days. With respect to the search criteria. So I'll start with the Boolean using of Boolean for search into three different aspects. The first is the databases used. The second is the Boolean search logic by itself, and the third would be using the manual search. You'll find also I will keep quoting some of the authors here, the Webster and Watson. In any of the place that you see the authors, like there is a specified way of writing the research papers. You should not be taking it up simply by what I say or somebody else tells about. You need to have a proper representation of all that you write as part of your research paper or thesis. So be very clear with respect to providing the rationale of if you're doing a manual search and including them as part of your search criteria in an SLR or in meta-analysis, that rationale has to be specified. And how do you ensure that the rationale is valid or not? Is by ensuring that you quote authors. These authors should be well-known authors who are experts in that particular field. So I'll be using only specifics with respect to what we typically call is also about the kind of seminal papers as well as the good authors who have authored these kind of approaches. So I'll be quoting some of them so that you get an idea with respect to how to make use of these as well. When we come into the databases, we have seen there are many databases. This is not an exhaustive list, but many. I have included some of them here in order to give some idea. For example, Web of Science and Scopus are very, very predominant and well-known, so that you could get a number of papers associated with them. And what we have seen in bibliometrics is it does have those options by which you can directly take an output from Web of Science and Scopus and give an input for your bibliometric analysis. Similarly, when we use meta-analysis, we could use for both output from Web of Science and Scopus as well. I think Dr. Jaspreet did also mention in one of the places, in one of the papers that he has shown, a rationale of an author specifying why Scopus was used and not Web of Science or vice versa. So you need to have that kind of thing built as well. Okay. I can give an example like what I have used as part of my meta-analysis paper. I did not use Scopus and Web of Science, and there was a rationale associated with it. I have used primarily from the well-known publishers like Emerald, Sage, Science Direct, the Taylor and Francis, as well as Wiley. And I have provided a rationale about why have I used only these and not the rest. So you need to have those validations when you do it. Similarly, some of the universities also have access to EBSCO and ProQuest. ProQuest could also be for the ABA Inform. So you could use something like EBSCO and ProQuest, but there are critical aspects with respect to the search results which comes in. Now the next question could come in, can I use Google Scholar? Well, you can use Google Scholar. It does return n number of papers. Are they all relevant? Should I be using that? So when you discuss with different scholars, each scholar will have their own approach associated with this in order to quantify them. You need to take the best which is applicable for your study, and the aim should predominantly be to make use of these kind of concepts in order to develop a quality paper. Coming to the Boolean search, I will take an example of mobile payment. Let me quickly demonstrate it across. I will make use of, say, the Google Scholar. Is it visible to all if I switch between slide presentation to
yes.
the page? Okay, perfect. So in Google Scholar, what do I do? For example, I simply use mobile followed by payments. Okay, without any additional criteria, I just use these two keywords, mobile payments. Now, you need to understand whether it uses an or whether it uses an and. Definitely it cannot be not. There are different ways by which the application by itself interprets it and the kind of results it provides you. So you can't say that I have used mobile payments, will it be simply an ORing? Okay, I'll typically go back to the logic which is being used by those. Google is quite ahead when it comes into these search criteria, and they have got a wonderful algorithm built into it. Is it the same for all? For example, if I use Web of Science, if I use Scopus, if I use, say, Science Direct, if I use Wiley, will I get the results which are mobile or payments, or is it everything which has got mobile and payments? So we may not be aware about this kind of logic. So we have to be very clear whenever we make use of such kind of criteria. So that's why I'm talking about the intelligence aspect of it. So this is one. So if you look into how many results it has come, is some 879,000 results. So let me go to the next level now. I say mobile or parents, or payments. So it has gone to 5450. Okay, now if I do something like mobile and payments, so if I do something like mobile and payments, so how many do I get? 886. So you need to be very clear with respect to what kind of results are you expecting and what will be part of your search. I can also use something like in double quotes. So that means this key, I'm getting, that's how Google Scholar works. It keeps giving the suggestions. Okay, if I use in double quotes, mobile payments, now what do I get? 28,700. So it has limited with respect to the number of papers that I get as a result. So that means I'm looking for the research papers which has a keyword mobile payments as one. Okay, so you have to use various criteria in order to identify the research papers, because the way these are being used is totally different. So how the keywords are used, how they are used in the title, it's totally different with different researchers. So that's number one. Second, I could also just use as mobile payment. Okay, now see the difference. I've just removed an S. I'm still getting 70,000. Okay, so does it include all with mobile payments? No. Can I use the keyword as mobile payment instead of mobile payments? Some could have definitely used it. So whenever you are doing a search, your search should include all possibilities, number one. Number two, it has to be intelligent enough in order to ensure that the results that you get in, you do not spend too much amount of time with having large number of papers that you get in. So the Boolean logic that you built in, that means the logic that you built in with the various Boolean operators, has to be intelligent enough in order to provide you with the results which are meaningful for the study that you are kindly performing for. Okay, so this is one part. Now, do people also have some other method of writing mobile payments? They could simply say M payments. Okay, yes, see how many results do I get? There are plenty. M payment or M payments. Some people could also use M dash payment. So I still get a lot of results associated with this. There are different ways by which even a mobile payment can be listed down. People could simply say digital payments. Okay, they could simply say digital payments. Now, is digital payment the same as mobile payment? Conceptually, they might, but in a search criteria, they might be different. So I need to make sure that I make use of all of this when I do a search with respect to the logic that I'm using in for. I can simply say mobile payments or digital payments. You always should have that Venn diagram in your mind whenever you are designing or defining the Boolean logic for using the search. So that's what I would call it as an intelligent search. You need to have all possibilities for this. By using these keywords. Okay, so this is one. Some people might even say it could be a digital wallet. Okay, do I have various papers only with digital wallet? Yes, I have. And it does provide a lot of results. Now, if I do mobile payment or digital wallet, definitely the results will be different. And it will be more number of papers that it could be. So with this, I can nullify excluding some of the papers which is not returned because of the search criteria that I've used. So what we have seen as part of the process for whether we use Prisma or any other approach, the first thing is to have a meaningful list of number of papers. How do we get the meaningful list of papers? Is by making use of all possibilities of using based upon the study that we have, or the study that the objectives of the study. I hope this is clear to everyone and it makes sense with respect to how to make use of this. I'll move on further. So I could use something like this. Okay, now this is again quite interesting one by using an AND. Okay, before I do that, let me give one more quick thing. Okay, going back to the same mobile payment. Now, I hope you are familiar with when to use a question mark and when to use an asterisk. An asterisk would represent any number of characters following it, whereas a question mark will represent a single character. Is it acceptable within the search criteria? For example, using a question mark is something, again, based upon the algorithm or the logic that they have used for. I can still have my own paper that I have given a title with a question mark as well. Will that be returned or not? Could be a good thing to look in for. So you have to use it very carefully again when you're building the logic. So if you want to have a results which includes mobile payment as well as mobile payments, I can simply make use of an asterisk at the end. So that means it will return all the papers which has got mobile payment or payments as well, or anything which is beyond the payment what it has. Okay. So here I could use this kind of logic with using multiple ORs. I can use multiple ANDs as well. Then I can, after using the different ORs, like I talked about mobile, digital wallet, or M payments, or M without a hyphen, with hyphen, wallets, digital wallets. So I need to look in for all the possibilities by which a researcher can identify a payment, which a researcher can identify or provide a title or a keyword which will be relevant for my study and make use of that. And then I can use some restrictions. For example, if I'm working on a specific model, this is something that I've made use of the model. If you are not familiar with it, is an UT-AUT or UT-AUT2, which was developed by Venkatesh. UT-AUT was in 2003 and UT-AUT2 was in 2012. A lot of papers does exist with respect to making use of this in consumer studies as well as in non-management studies as well. They have used it for. It's quite popular models today in order to understand the behavioral intent or the adoption patterns. Though it traces back to how it was developed for example, it goes till diffusion of information. From there, TAM model was built in, and various other models were built in, and then eventually what we look for is UT-AUT and UT-AUT2. Again, what we can restrict, mobile payments could have been existing for a long time, but if my study is primarily limited only to a specified theoretical model, then I can restrict the results that it gives them. So I can make use of ANDing and then say only for a specified theory or for a particular model it should return. The next step would be about the manual search. So as I said, one is making use of these search criteria in various databases which returns the result. There could be certain possibility that there are some key papers that, for example, the way that I have been searching for, I do have access to some of these papers. Does it qualify to be included as part of my SLR and meta-analysis because the results did not return it? That should not be the kind of thought we should get. If you have any papers that you have access to, you can always include it and indicate it as manual search. Then you need to go in for specifically identifying about the rationale of using it and why did you use it. I'm sure most of or everybody would be familiar with what the concept of go backward and go forward criteria is, and this is something that we normally use for whenever we use the search for the various research papers or literatures in the databases. So once we get any of the papers, what we do is we look into how many people have cited them. So that would become as go forward. So if the paper has been cited by any of the researchers, and that could be as go forward. So it is, if I've written a paper wherein I have cited various research papers in the scholars, so that would be go backward. So using one paper, I can identify what all papers has been cited by a particular scholar, and if any of them are useful, I can make use of this as part of my study. Similarly, using a particular research paper, I can also see who all have cited for that. That would be a go forward. So you need to make use of these concepts in order to identify the papers and then manually add them as part of your whole results or the database that you're using in for. So that would be a manual search, and it is an allowed search by which you could quote Webster and Watson in order to make sure that you are not being asked a question with respect to why have you used a manual method instead of using, depending only on a database search criteria, what it has returned the results. The objective is to make sure that it is comprehensive, it is repeatable. So when you are providing, for example, if the journal editor comes and says you have to provide an output, you could also have a column which says these search results were an output from the database search or which one were from a manual search. That would be very, very clear and very evident because it has to be repeatable whenever we look in for. Okay, moving on to the next step is in the various search terms. So how do we establish them? We looked into various, we talked about various aspects of what should be inclusion, exclusion, etc. So there are a dozen of criteria that you can use for in order to ensure that you define them very clearly from the beginning of before even you start with evaluating the papers, or even it could be done at quite beginning in order to make sure that all the results that you obtain are relevant as part of your study. So this is one of the key steps. Let me re-emphasize or reiterate on this point. Whenever we do an SLR or meta-analysis, it is not simply making use of a software tool, clicking some of the buttons and getting you an output. You have to have quality as well as the rigor, and it should be repeatable, and it should be relevant as per your study. So these are a dozen of criteria which should be used for defining how and what you will be doing as part of this. So let me go through each one of them one by one. The first is the content, which could be the topics or variable. If I look into my example of mobile payments, I could say what are the different keywords that I'm using. It may not exactly be a Boolean logic, but at least some keywords that I would state, like mobile payments, digital wallets, and also those that have used the variables as part of the two models, which are UT-AUT and UT-AUT2. I can give an exclusion criteria, for example, that studies that focus on either secondary data, or I could also say the studies that is focused on TAM. TAM is another popular model, the technology acceptance model. I could exclude those kind of studies as well. So I need to be very clear and very specific with respect to the type of studies which will be included or excluded. It could be based upon even the variables, like what was demonstrated by Dr. Jaspreet. I think she also showed some of the papers earlier with respect to the variables being used in. So you can also restrict with respect to those variables, or you can expand it further by adding the variables which are not even part of these studies. Then comes the publication language. So inclusion is only those which are in English, whereas non-English languages like Korean, Chinese, and all has been excluded as part of the study. Journals are again a very, very important aspect. When you are publishing them in good journals, they would definitely look for, the quality of the journals that has been identified, and not even just the quality of journals, but also the quality of the papers per se as well. So you can say those journals which are quite rigor with respect to the peer reviewing process, or it could be from selected databases search only that you have looked in for. For example, if you go in for Google Scholar, I could get any number, lots of numbers of them. So will all of them be within the scope of it? Can I ensure that my study has got that quality and rigor if I make use of it? May not be. So you have to be very specific on what you are making use of. You can say exclusion would be those which are not peer reviewed. You can also restrict based upon the authors, but if that is not within the scope, you can say it is not applicable for. Settings. Now, if I talk about only mobile payments, I could have n number of studies which are related to consumers. I could also have n number of studies which are not related to consumers. For example, it could be merchants, it could be agents, or vendor related. I hope you all understand this, because I've taken a very generic topic of mobile payments. For example, if I do a review by understanding about the consumer behavior, about why would a consumer adopt mobile payments, with some qualitative study, that would be included for. Similarly, I can do for the merchants as well. For example, I can go to a shop and get my questionnaire filled in by them, and then do my quantitative analysis and come out with results. So will that again be the same? May not be, because how the consumer views versus what the merchant's views will be totally different. So I don't want to combine those studies together. I can be very specific with this. Again, I need to give rationale at each stages. So I'm elaborating further so that you get the point of why do I have this as an inclusion and exclusion. So the kind of views of consumers and merchants will definitely differ. So don't go by my words again that it will differ. There are studies which has clearly pointed out them. I need you to give validated references at each step whenever you are talking about any rationale you are providing, as well as the inclusion and exclusion details. So before you begin with any of the work, my suggestion would be is to have these kind of clear-cut aspects of these criteria on these 12 different dimensions. Can we also restrict on participants and subjects? Yes, we could. If not, you could say there are no specific criteria, but you could also elaborate it further of what you have found in. When we talk about participants and subjects, it could be, for example, cultural is one of the things which was shown in the past couple of days. So do you want to restrict based upon those only what results are? So that could be one of the inclusion criteria. So you can say in exclusion could be those which are non-cultural aspects associated with it. Or if there are no specific criteria, you can, if you have used certain other aspects associated with it, you can also record them. For example, you could say they recorded if a study used students only as samples. you will still find a lot of research papers who do only on students, as well as some could be generic, which are non-students as well. Is there a difference between the two studies? Yes, there are, because the sample size is, biased towards what the students' views are compared to, people in generic. Or it could be the moderators, different type of moderators being used. And so you can restrict again further based upon the participants or the subjects. And here in the program, for example, if your study is based on certain model or certain theory, you could do that. There are various models and various theories. Now, in today's all the discussions I'm focusing on is only from the management point of view. I am not looking into any other aspects like be it medical or other fields, because management, though it is multidisciplinary in nature, it's quite different when it comes into the medical field. The focus of all of this is primarily from within the scope of the social sciences and management field only. So these are the different theories and models which are being used, for example, in IS studies, in consumer behavior, in marketing studies. It could be in brand management, for example, if I want to look in for the brand equity. It could be in various HR studies. So I can list them appropriately. And again, the exclusion, I can say the variables of other models like TAM has not been used as part of it. What kind of research design am I focusing on? Do I want to include those studies which are qualitative in nature as well? No. So I could say in inclusion, only those which has used quantitative studies. Within quantitative studies also, you could get various other things. For example, people would have used structural equation modeling. People would have used just regression. People could have used something else like clustering in order to arrive at some of their results with respect to this. So I can clearly define based upon the scope of my study that I will be using only those which are quantitative in nature and which has used SEM. Now, SEM could be in SPSS, it could be in RStudio, it could be in PLSM as well, either of them. So I don't have to restrict those because software is something which is not quite relevant in this scenario. So what are the exclusion? I can clearly define them if it is clustering or MANOVA. Sampling is another key aspect here. If there's nothing, then you can say it is not applicable and no specific criteria used, because how the sample has been run also could be the criteria, whether I've used a convenient sampling or have I used a different type of sampling that could be specified. Again, if you use it, it would further restrict the number of studies. Date of publication. I know there has been various questions asked. Should I do it for 5 years? Should I use it for 10 years, 20 years? I can give very validated examples against each one of them if you pick in for. But here I will restrict. I can give you examples from the bibliometric perspective as well as the meta-analysis or SLR with respect to what should be the duration associated with it and why people have used it. But here what I'll do is I'll take this as an example and then state why. If I did for a certain periodicity, say for example, I looked into my search criteria on a specified date, so that will be my end date 13th of April. One point for identifying the start date, here I have specified 2003, I'll come into why it is, but I'll give you certain conditions again. If I do a start date, what should be the start date? It could be based upon what my content is, mobile payments. When did mobile payments first start? In India as well as in abroad. So I need to have some idea associated with this. So that could be the start time. Or secondly, it could also be based upon the theory or the models that I have in mind that I will be using as part of my study. So, if I take you back to what I mentioned earlier, UT-AUT was introduced in the year 2003. So my study is from 2003. You cannot have a paper related to the conceptual model of UT-AUT before that. Hence, I have given this as a periodicity. So what I get, 17 years approximately with this. So would there have been paper in 2003? They may not be, because it was a model just introduced in 2003. Depending upon when it was, how much time it has been taken. So the number of papers would increase over a period of time. So you need to have a proper rationale of even identifying the start date or the periodicity that you have taken in. So please do not take it just because somebody told you it should be 5 years, 10 years, 20 years and all. You have to have a rationale associated with it, and you need to mention it as part of your research paper also. The date of data collection. Now, why is it required is because certain research papers do mention what is the duration they have taken in. For example, some could have taken 2 months, some could have taken 1 week, some would have taken 6 months as well as a year as well in order to collate those data. It typically depends upon the studies as well. So if you want to restrict it further, for example, you want to improvise on your quality by negating all those which has been quite quick. If somebody has done within 1 week or 15 days, then if that is a periodicity, what they talk about their data collection, you can exclude them. Similarly, if somebody has said, I have taken 6 months or 1 year just for data collection, should I be including them as part of my study? Because the variability will be quite huge. Unless and until it has been specified appropriately, and that would the rigor would have been compromised associated with it. So do you want to include them as part of a study or not? You can do a decision accordingly. You can make it. So here one example what I've used is also, though I have recorded as part of the study, I did not include the studies which did not give any dates of data collection. So that means you will still find certain studies which is not specified what was the data collection periodicity that they have used in which year, which month. Ideally it should be done, but there are certain studies which would not do that as well. Then you come into the duration. So there could be studies which are cross-sectional in nature. There could be studies which are longitudinal as well. Do we have that kind of studies with mobile payments? Yes, we do. So you can still say what are included, what are excluded, and then define it accordingly. So these 12 criteria are very, very important whenever you're designing for your be it SLR or meta-analysis. You must go through this rigor in order to clearly define what are inclusion and exclusion. Please do not proceed with just simply taking out an output from one of the databases and then going ahead with your going ahead further with your SLR or meta-analysis. As I said, my focus on my topic here today is only on those rigor and quality criteria, which will make you publish those kind of articles in a good journals and to come up with a quality research paper. So these 12 criteria are very, very important from the point of view of identification of those. I will not take questions now. What I will do is I will complete my slides, and then at the end I will open it up for questions. So if there are certain questions which are not answered, then we'll have a lunch break, and then probably we could continue them. Moving on further with respect to the rigor in systematic review. So as I said, simply doing a collection or compiling the research papers will not produce you a quality paper. That is not sufficient. You need to ensure that the rigor is being established, maintained, as well as it is being listed down in your papers. So the first thing what the good journals will look for is whether rigor has been identified, mentioned, and established as part of the research paper or not. So that is the key aspect. Okay, now I did mention it in the note. What is a mechanical process? That means you are simply given a set of guidelines. You say, I search for the paper, do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I simply follow that mechanically, and if I produce some result, it lacks various quality aspects. There are key subtle things when it comes into the academics of what we need to comply with and how do we produce quality papers. So in order to ensure that a scholar meets with these rigor criteria, there are two key things. One is about synthesizing the available material. I am sure that you all are familiar with what synthesizing is all about. So whenever you write a literature review by itself, you need to look into the synthesizing, not simply repeating of what somebody has done, not simply rephrasing those, but you need to synthesize various literatures into it. Similarly, even in case of SLR or a meta-analysis that you do, you need to be in a position to synthesize those available literatures. And second, you need to provide a scholarly critique of the theory. So these two are key important aspects when it comes into the establishing the rigor aspects in your research paper. Moving on further. This is a kind of flow chart what has been provided by Okoli. This is the author who has provided. It's a very good good paper as well. So if you look into the Prisma approach versus this, there are a lot of similarities associated with it. For example, what you do is identifying the purpose. So you got some objective in place. Then how do you ensure that you search for the literatures? So you got some selection criteria. Then you come into extracting those results, identifying whether it does comply with your scope of your study or not. Then you further go into synthesizing them and writing, for example, making use of some of the tools of what we have gone through in the past a couple of days by using those statistical tools in order to produce some of the results, and then eventually writing a review. So this is on similar front, but it does into drilling down further in order to identify 8 key steps as part of this process. I won't go into too much of detail into each of them, but I'll briefly explain with respect to these. So purpose of your study, draft protocol, and train the team. So as I said, identifying the criteria and the protocol is the key aspect. Please do not simply do any search. You have to sit down and plan for it. And this is a critical phase before you actually move into any of them. Training a team is again a very important aspect. Whenever there are more than one individuals involved as part of the research, each one of them should be on the same page. They need to have the same flow of thoughts. Or for example, if you're doing codifications, they need to understand what kind of codifications will be, what kind of objectives they have in place. So it has to be something which needs to be worked in unison. Again, in good journals, they would also specify what is the contribution of, for example, if there are 3 authors or 4 authors. In good journals, they would also specify what has been the contribution of author 1, what has been the contribution of author 2 and author 3. So it's very, very explicitly to be identified as part of it. So if there are multiple authors involved while working on, for example, an SLR or a meta-analysis, both of them are doing codification of different papers or similar papers. So there are key criteria to be looked into it. I will take this as one example in the last slide and explain when there are multiple authors working on it. It's quite exhaustive when it comes into the qualitative research as well. But here, what we are working on is ensuring that I will come into what these categories are, how do we define these categories, and how do we ensure that the teams are actually working in unison. Practical slide I've just explained with respect to the various criteria, and searching for the literatures, I've just given a demonstration with the Google Scholar as well. And once you extract the data, it could be quantitative, it could be qualitative as well. Some questions were asked yesterday when I'm writing a systematic literature review. Do I need to do only with qualitative studies, or can I write an SLR with qualitative study as well? So this would answer your questions. And this author, Okoli, has given a wonderful, wonderful rationale associated with each one of them as well. I don't think I will be able to cover all of them as part of this. So I would leave it with you in order to study this. But if you have any questions, you are welcome to ask. And then again, when you're appraising the quality, it needs to be done on both aspects of quantitative as well as qualitative. Synthesizing studies are again very, very important. When you're synthesizing the studies, again, it could be on quantitative, it could be on qualitative, or it could be on having the both. But having quantitative and qualitative is rare. It's very, very rare. Are there any? Yes, there are. But it is very rare. So you need to look from that perspective as well. And then eventually you write for the review. So when it comes to all of us, whether I'm a scholar or whether I'm a PhD, anybody who's involved in the research needs to ensure that it does mandatorily meet these 4 criteria. explicit. So when we talk about explicit, it is what I have actually defined in the previous one, what is exclusion and inclusion criteria. So we have to explicitly mention each and everything that we have used as part of our research process for identification, right from identification till the end of it, in be it SLR or be it meta-analysis. And then comprehensive. Coming into the systematic, as we have seen, it should be a systematic approach, a step-by-step approach. You define what you have done as part of each of the steps. Then the reproducibility. So whether I do or any other person who picks up the same kind of logic and the same aspect for the same dates, the same criteria, they should be able to produce the same set of results. That's what reproducibility or repeatability of these studies. I'll take couple of key aspects with respect to what has been quoted by Von Brochet in 2009. Says the process of excluding the sources. Okay, what we are here talking about is inclusion-exclusion criteria, and what we are doing in a systematic manner. So anything that we do, either for excluding or for including, it has to be made transparent as possible in order to review to prove credibility. There are a lot of keywords here. Okay, exclusion, inclusion criteria, I've just gone through that. What could be the process associated with it? How many steps for each one of them, the rationale associated with it? Okay, I've just gone through those 12 steps associated with them. It has to be made as transparent as possible. How can you make it transparent? In your research paper, you need to clearly articulate for each one of them, not only just listing this was my search criteria, but you need to give a validation associated with it, like some rationale I gave you for the periodicity associated with it. So you need to make sure that everything is listed down clearly in order to review to prove the credibility. So how can you ensure that your paper is credible in nature? So only from the point of view of that everything is being covered as part of it. Well, everything is a huge word. So, whatever is humanly possible is what is being covered for when we talk about, rigor aspect associated with it, as well as the different criteria that is being used. Only then the readers are able to assess the exhaustiveness of a review, and other scholars in the field can more confidently use or reuse the results in their own research. Now, this is again very key important aspect. After you have written your research paper which is published, what kind of citations do you get? One is the kind of citation, and second is number of citations. That is determined by the quality of your research paper by itself. And here what we are talking about, since it is an SLR or a meta-analysis, the number of papers which are being produced related to systematic literature review or meta-analysis is less compared to the other type of papers. For example, if you're doing an empirical study or a quantitative study or a qualitative study, so there could be many more compared to the number of papers that you could have for SLR or meta-analysis. SLR, you still will get a few, but meta-analysis are still less. And what Professor Neeraj Kaushik is going to cover in the next session on meta-sem would be further very less number of papers related to that, because the complexity of the, shall I say, the strategies, technologies, or the amount of efforts which are required to put in for this varies a lot. So the different keywords is about readers being able to assess the exhaustiveness. So if I'm reading a particular paper, I need to understand how and what a person has done, and whether by reading that, whether it does qualify to be a kind of quality product, in order to ensure that I'm able to use it and I can cite it as part of my study or not. Okay. Now coming to the next part of quality assessment, what we have seen in the previous flowchart, whether I talk about this particular flowchart or even I talk about the Prisma approach or any other approaches that we have gone through, at every stage there are different criteria to be used in order to evaluate them from the quality perspective. So I've taken this as one of the examples of what Pitway has identified as part of his study on the different assessment criteria in order to ensure that the papers which are being reviewed follows the quality assessment for it. They are in 5 different elements. I have not included any calculations for this, but if you're interested, I can quickly demonstrate them and show it in an Excel file as well on how to use them. First, let's understand the concept associated with it. The 5 elements are theory, robustness. So what typically this means is when you're reading a paper, you have done all your search criteria, so you have identified how much qualifies for it. Say you are at a particular stage in your research, in your systematic review, and then you want to identify whether this research paper is actually of quality or not. Should I be including it or excluding it? And you need to have a rationale associated with why should I include and why should I exclude. So you can look into these different elements and then say whether it does meet with the criteria or not. The first is theory robustness. I think you all understand about it. If you want, I can expand on it, but I think you all understand about each of the key elements. I will briefly go into, for this scoring of 0 means it is absence, 1 means it is low, 2 is medium, and 3 is high. Or it is not applicable. For example, if I'm using certain research papers in which they have not used any of the theory, and my study is not to scoping anything on that perspective, I can say it is not applicable. But if there is a research paper which for example, I'm identifying various studies related to UTIUT and UTIUT2. If that research paper does not have that used info, they have used just some variables, then you could say make it as absence. So it has to be clearly identified and put in this specific, shall I say, a rating scale. So first is theory robustness. Second is the methodology of what the research paper has used in for, the data supporting arguments. The third would be implications for practice. So you've got, if you look into the structuring of a research paper, you do have something which are in the last section, the implications for the theoretical implications as well as managerial implications. So they have taken in one as the implications for practice. Then generalizability. So that means whether the study can further be generalized or not, or is it confined to only, very, very limited aspects. And there are some studies like this, so you can look into based on that and their contribution of the study by itself. So based upon these 5 elements, and you can do a scoring. Absence of it does not provide any information for the criteria. Then you can define what do you mean by low, medium, and high. So it's a poor awareness, or it is under or over referenced. And so maybe if it has got a very low validity of the theory, that means they have used a particular theory which is not even valid. Or there has just been one paper published which was, say, 20, 30 years ago, you picked up that and nobody else have used it. So, you need to be very, very clear with respect to what you're using in for, whether it's very valid based upon your study or not. So don't go by only what I am saying. There could be very valid theories which are old as well, but which could be applicable today also. But whether it is applicable based upon your study or your type of SLR and meta-analysis that you're looking in for is what you need to evaluate that. Medium, the basic understanding of the issues around the topic, and the theory weakly is related to the data. And the third would be the deep and broad knowledge of relevant literature and theory, relevant for addressing the research. And it is good relation theory data, or whether it is not applicable. Similarly, for methodology, you can talk about the data accuracy, whether it is the research design is flawed or it is right, the kind of gaps, whether the research design is robust or not, what kind of sampling they have used. So all this could be looked into from the rigorous point of view. That means what you're doing now is critically, you are evaluating the quality of each of the research paper that becomes a scope for your study in order to include or exclude them as part of your SLR and meta. Similarly, implication for the practice, the generalizability, as well as the contribution. So on these 5 different elements, you could give a scoring of 0, 1, 2, and 3. You can arrive at a score and eventually you can decide. You can also have a cutoff criteria. I'll give you a quick example. I don't know how much time we have. Professor Neeraj Kaushik, I don't know how much time we have. Shall I go through with an example, or shall I leave it in case somebody has got a question? I can answer them appropriately later on.
Raja, you got all the time. You take as much time as you want.
Okay. Okay, that's fine. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll give you a quick example of how this is what I have shown you is here only the criteria. Now, when you are actually doing an assessment of your research paper, how do you actually implement it? Is what I will quickly show this. So, okay, so what I'll do is I'll simply copy them in an Excel file. I hope the Excel file is visible.
Yes, it's visible.
Okay, perfect. Why I'm not getting a transpose in here? Okay, I'll make it easier. I'll not worry too much here. What I'll simply do is I'll just make use of this. Okay, I've got these 5 different criteria that I mentioned as part of the slide. Okay, so what I will do is I will also zoom it a little bit so that it's visible and it's clear to all of you. Let me just build up the template first, and then I will get into that. It's a live demonstration I'm giving you for this, so okay, I should be able to see all 5 of them, and then probably I'll give a total for the total scoring. Okay, so now what do I do with each one of them is I'll just say this is my research paper 1. I'll just give a quick demo in order to understand how do we do it. So I'll just take say 3, 4 of them. Okay, say the first research paper. So if I take you back to the slide, what it was is on 5 different criteria, the score that I will be giving is 0, 1, 2, 3. Okay, as well as not applicable. So this is the scoring what I have in mind for. So for my research paper 1, theory robustness, I can say okay, it's pretty good. It's quite good that I can use for. I can say 3. Then comes the methodology, implication, and all. Let me center it so that it doesn't miss out on when you see them. Okay. So the second is I can say methodology, data support, arguments, and all. It's pretty good. Say 3. Implication, say 2. I'm taking this arbitrarily, okay? But what you need to do is you need to evaluate each of the papers by reading them, going through the typical sections, and ensuring that you give a scoring based upon the criteria that has been identified for. So here, only for demonstration purpose, I'm just giving some scoring here, okay? Generalizability, I said 2. Contribution is say 2. So what I do is then I do a sum, a quick total for each one of these for the research papers. So maximum what can I have is 15, because the maximum I can give is 3 on a range from 0 to 3 on 5 different criteria. So out of 15, for this particular research paper, I have allotted 12 marks out of 15. You simply consider this: if you are correcting somebody's paper, the maximum marks is 50 or 100, and then you score each of the questions. Same is what we are doing here. So out of a total of 15, for this particular paper, the score is 12. Okay, then for the second research paper, I find the theory robustness is say just 0. I didn't find it of good quality. Methodology, it's still fine. Implication is not good. Generalizability 0. Contribution is 0. So what I typically get is a score of say 3 for this. Okay, then I review the next one. So I can keep doing like this, say 2, 3, 5, say 3, 1, some numbers. I'm just arbitrarily typing in them. I could say something which is say 2, 2, 2, 1, 2. Okay, something like this. Okay. Now for all my research papers, then I compute this. I say I've got this method in order to score them and a total. Then what will I look for? How do I decide what should be included and excluded? Then I can take a cutoff. Okay, this would be the next step. I take a cutoff. The cutoff is what I decide for. So what I say is, if my if the scoring of all of see, typically, if I want to draw an analogy of the cutoff, you can think from the perspective of whenever you are giving marks for your students, for example, you got something which says what is the pass percentage. Okay, that is what is the cutoff what we are looking for. So a cutoff is nothing but a pass percentage. The student can score say 40, 50, 70 or a distinction, or the student can score 90, 99 marks as well. We are concerned from the point of view of inclusion and exclusion criteria of the papers by ensuring what is the cutoff point. There is nothing but a passing point. In certain scenarios, it could be 33. In certain scenarios, it could be 40. In certain scenarios, it could be 50% as well. So that is something has to be decided for. And whatever, now you can ask me, what should I decide for mine? Whatever you do, whatever cutoff percentage you decide for here, or not a percentage, but the number that you chosen for here, make sure that you have a rationale for it as well. Okay, you just can't arbitrarily say my cutoff is 10, my cutoff is 12, or my cutoff is 2. Okay, you can't just do that. So you have to be justifying with respect to what is the cutoff that you have taken in for. I hope everybody understands how to provide a rationale and what should be done. I don't think that would be a scope of what I can discuss it as part of here. But if you have questions, I'm more than happy to clarify some of those points. So the cutoff, what I'm taking is, I'm taking a cutoff of 9 here. Okay, so I'll just mention it here, 9. That means for any of the research paper which has got 9 and above qualifies to be included as part of my study, and anything which is below that is simply removed off. So I can simply include here, for example, 12 is greater than 9, or I can build in the formulas to say which one is included, excluded. So I'll say this is included. So that means it is within the scope of inclusion of my my study. The second, it is excluded. Okay, the third is included. The fourth is exactly at 9. Do I include them? Yes, I include it. So anything which is below 9. So here what it could happen is, the minimum what can I have? Okay, look from the objectivity associated with it. The minimum what can I have is 0, and the maximum what I can have is 15. If you are having all zeros, that means it's definitely not a good quality paper. So it is a problem from, I would relate it back to your search criteria. If you still get paper which are all 0, 0, 0, zeros here, and you get a total of 0, you simply get a total of 0 here. That means it is definitely a problem with the kind of research, the kind of search that you have done initially. My suggestion would be, please go back, have an intelligent search built in. You just can't get any paper which is 0 on all the quality criteria that you have said, because this is being done at the later stage. You should not be getting it, but I'm not ruling out the possibility. Okay, so then so minimum is 0, maximum is 15. So so at least if each one of them has at least 1, for example. Okay, so you could get something like 5. So what you are trying to do is removing all those which are of low quality, which are below 9, and anything which is above 9 to 15 is what is qualifies to be part of your study, and they are of good quality papers on different criteria that you have been mentioned. I hope that explanation is clear to all. So that's how you can build this. And when you are quoting this in your research paper, you don't have to provide this table. Okay. It's just one line. See, normally what we do in a research paper is we do a lot of things in the background, but what we quote as part of the research paper is hardly 1 or 2 lines, or for example, a paragraph. So you need to articulate it appropriately so that it conveys the meaning of the kind of quality assessment that you have done. You can definitely include this kind of table. You can use this table and say, this is what my quality assessment criteria is. And again, you need to justify how have you used this assessment criteria. That's number one. Then secondly, when you are writing for the results, you can say, for example, you had 100 papers. I can just expand on this further. Let me see if I can reduce this and include one more column here. Okay. So I can say, what was the total number of papers? Say I had 100 papers, which I have reviewed as part of this, and the ones which were included and excluded. Say I got something, say 80 of them which are included, so 20 were excluded. So out of these 80, I can simply state how many of them actually followed the criteria and the rationale associated with it. If I removed 20 papers, what were the reason for it? I have to state the cutoff point as well. I can state that maximum was 15. I've taken a cutoff value of 9 by giving a justification, and then I would say 80 of them out of 100, 80 papers actually followed or complied with this cutoff of 9 and above. Hence, these are a part of my inclusion criteria. So that's how it has to be calculated and reported as part of the research paper. Okay, let me move on further. Okay, now this is the next step. So what here I have given is I've given a kind of consolidation of all of them. That means at different stages, irrespective of the type of protocol that you're using and what you're doing as part of it, you have got different exclusion, inclusion criteria. At every stage, you have got the filter conditions. And so what you need to do is, when you're doing the codification, in order to understand if you have excluded, why have you excluded it? So you can give some criteria associated with it. Okay, I hope you all understand about what this means. Article retracted by the journal. If not, I can explain it. So I'll assume that you know about all of this. I'll simply go on. If there are questions, I'm more than happy to take them. So within the whole of the number of papers that I've reviewed I found in this particular category there is one paper which falls under the retraction. The rigor. Okay, now what the rigor is, I showed in the previous slide about the different criteria I've used in order to do a quality assessment. But I can state it as rigor of the quality checks that I have done in order to assess a research paper. I can say how many of them did not meet with the condition of rigor. If I'm doing a quantitative study, I still find there are a lot of papers which are a kind of literature review and different types, be it narrative, be it systematic, and also I won't be using it as part of the like if I'm doing a meta-analysis, I won't be including them because it won't be related. And I have further criteria. What I mean by loosely related, that means within the criteria I've got sub-criteria as well. If I'm getting this 188, it's not just simply like this. I've got various subcategories associated with this in order to understand why have I categorized them as loosely related. I don't think I'll be showing all of them, but if you want any views, I can always share it with you. Then no access. There could still be certain papers which I do not have access to. So you have to categorize them and list them appropriately. So I did find there are 2 papers or 2 research articles which I did not have access to. Non-English, the language that I mentioned about. Now, why do I still get this in mind? Because in certain papers that you have seen it, they could be bilingual in nature, or they could simply have the keywords in English and the abstract in English, whereas the whole paper is in, say, Korean language. But I can't read that, I can't translate it, I can't use it. When I use a search criteria, it will search I find in English. The title, only this part they have in English, the rest is, the complete paper is in other language. So I have to exclude them. Can I find these kind of papers? Yes, definitely it'll return in the search criteria because of the reasons I mentioned. So even if you're simply giving a category, you need to have a rationale associated with each of them. Okay, like not a UTI adoption study. Similarly, it could be a composite construct. I hope you all understand what these composite constructs are. So if there are such kind of constructs which is being used, I can categorize it and then I can say this is not within the scope of my study. So I have excluded total of 353 by using these exclusion criteria. I have to list them appropriately. Now, when it comes into the multiple authors working on it, so this is one, quite exhaustive job, because for every criteria that you have used, you need to use something like a content analysis. With the content analysis, you need to make sure that you define these categories or these labels to be quite appropriate. Every author who works on these has to use a similar one. For example, if I say it lacks rigor, so the way that I calculate and the way that my second author or co-author or a third author calculate should be on similar grounds. If it does not, that means there is a mismatch in all our understandings, and we can't be totally apart when it comes into these kind of identifications. We have to converge at a certain point in time. So that has to be reviewed. There are strategies associated with it as well, right from the beginning of how the kind of training has to be involved as part of this. Anyway, that's for a different day probably. I will quickly go through some of these aspects in the next slide with respect to using whenever there are multiple authors, then what we look for is the reliability. Now, remember this, whenever we are doing a quantitative study, it is, I won't say it's easier to figure out, but you still have certain way in order to figure out the reliability. For example, you take Cronbach alpha, you look in for item-to-item correlation while doing the factor analysis. You understand what factor loads, what items loads onto which factor. So subsequently, you've got various statistical methods or statistical measures in order to identify the reliability of the scale. Whereas here what we are doing is purely qualitative in nature. That means whatever that we have done till now using the process, be it Prisma or any other process, it's all qualitative in nature. That means we are reviewing the title, we are reviewing the abstract, we are reviewing the keyword, we are reviewing the paper. So everything is qualitative in nature. Though we are looking in from certain aspect of putting in the quantitative, for example, what I showed you in this slide of doing the quality assessment by giving them some numbers and then saying anything which qualifies below 9 will be excluded and 9 and above will be included. But still, all the work that we do is all qualitative in nature. So the concept of content analysis during the codification process and all comes into the play. If you want to understand more about the codification and content analysis and how multiple authors work on it and ensuring that you've got a good result, please do refer to this book. This book is wonderful with respect to content analysis by Kimberly Neuendorf. It is by Sage Publication, and the name of the book is the Content Analysis Guidebook. Okay. The next step comes in. See, I'm not going into the details of content analysis. As I said, it's a qualitative approach, and there are various considerations associated with it. Though I do have my first research paper associated with a qualitative study wherein I have done all of these. Now, since we are involved into the certain measures by which multiple authors are working together, how do we ensure that different authors, when they provide the results with respect to, for example, you have identified the different criteria, like I looked into this, okay, the categories included. I did 500, or it could be certain overlaps between each of them, what they have done. Okay, so here what we do is we have to look in for an inter-rater agreement. That means when author 1 does and author 2 does, what type of results do they achieve in? Whenever we look into any of the criteria with respect to, final result of saying included, excluded. So it has to be exactly similar when it comes into the multiple authors working on. Otherwise, if there is a mismatch within the authors by itself, that means we have not used a proper approach. The rigor is lacking in the whole study. Within the study itself, there is too much of variation, and that should be avoided. And there is a method for doing that. So the inter-rater agreement is something which is calculated by using Cohen's Kappa. I just created a quick demo on this in order to, give you the idea of how Cohen's Kappa is calculated for whenever we do a kind of, say, systematic review, or this is applicable for any of the qualitative measures that we look in for when there are multiple authors involved. So the key advantage is it takes into account the possibility of agreeing by chance. It should not be simply saying that, okay, I agree, second author agree, third author agree. And having all three of us agreeing on a certain thing, it could be by chance as well. And there could be various aspects in which none of us agree for example, or only two agrees, one doesn't. Which two agrees, it could be varying as well. So all this has to be taken into consideration by ensuring that these kind of variations are negated from the study. And I'll re-emphasize, whenever we are publishing papers in any of the good quality journals, all these needs to be taken into consideration. If you simply do not do it, then it could be a desk rejected, or it could be rejected at the very first go. That means it doesn't even go to the reviewer, for example. So you need to take all these pointers into consideration in order to make sure that you are, not only you, we as a whole in the research community, we are able to produce good quality research papers, and which could be reused. So our objective is not only just simply writing a research paper and publishing it, but whereas it should be something which should be used both in academic community as well as into the industrial community. Let me re-emphasize on this point that SLRs, meta-analysis, and anything beyond this that you do should get good citations. That can only come in from the perspective of ensuring that rigor has been established, maintained as part of your research. Okay, so let me go through a quick one. Okay, before that, let me tell you the formula as well. As I said, I've got a very quick calculation for this in order to demonstrate about how do we arrive at these figures. I'll also explain on what these are. For the benefit of all, the Cohen's Kappa calculation is PAO minus PAE upon 1 minus PAE. I'll demonstrate about what each one of them means and how do we do that. Okay, I'll take Professor Neeraj's view that we have a lot of, I can still continue with this kind of discussions by which I can demonstrate it. And anything which is not covered, then Professor, what we can do is we can break for lunch at 1:30 and I can come back and resume it further from there. Okay, so here what I've done is I've simply taken some examples. The table that you see here, this particular first table, what it shows is the coder A, the coder B. Okay, and what I've given is whether they agree or disagree. So what typically this means, I've got a researcher 1 and researcher 2. So that's what I'm translating it as coder A and coder B. That means each one of us authors who are working on a similar set of data, we do this codification, hence coder A, coder B. Okay. So the coder A, so I have given certain, you call them research papers, you call them different advertisements. There are different quality aspects that you would be looking into. So I say for the first one, coder A has agreed on it. So that means the coder A has given 1, coder B has also given 1. So that means if you look into both of them, there is an agreement. So whatever, if I go back to quality criteria, for example, I take one research paper, I give it to author 1. The author 1 gives certain score. Then I give the same paper to the second author. Author 2 also gives certain scores. The scores can be on different quality conditions as well as what we arrive at a total. Okay, so we need to look into those and then see what values have been given. I'm just taking this as an example as 1, 2, and 3. Okay, so if coder A is given 1, coder B has also given 1, that means they both agree. Similarly, for the second one, both are given 2, so they agree. If one of the coder has given 2, whereas coder B has given a value of 3, as soon as it changes, there is a disagreement. Okay, so there is an amount of disagreement between the two coders, how they have done. Now, please remember this. I've simplified this by just using 2 coders. When it comes into 3 coders or more than that, the complication increases. So you need to have additional columns, and there has to be, in order to understand the agreement, each one of them has to have the same scoring. And that is very, very critical. So as I said, in qualitative study, we look into some of these aspects of ensuring that right from the beginning there is an agreement between each of them, and they all are in the same page, in order to ensure that this kind of rigor is being maintained in. Okay, and this kind of scoring is not done, 2 people sitting together. And then I say, shall I give this number? The second says, shall I give this number? And then you come up with this. That's not the way to be done. It is the coder A and coder B independently works on it and then gives these numbers. And then we calculate by coming into this kind of stating whether they agree or disagree. So it's simply what we have at the end of it. For there are total 10 of these units. For 10, how many are in agreement and how many are in disagreement? So I just use formulas. I hope you all understand, like the sum or typically the countif and all with this. I would normally use formulas so that I don't have to redo anything, and it's much easier. And Excel is pretty good with all of this. So as soon as I change any of the values, my whole thing changes. I can even show you, the overall output also changes for me. So I have a lot of formulas inbuilt into it. So as soon as I do this, so what I have is out of total 10, there are 7 on, say, 7 research papers they agree on with the same scores. Anything which is disagreement has been logged in for. So hence there are 3 which are disagreed for. And this is what I score as the agreement. PAO is nothing but the initial agreement what both of them have gotten, which 7 out of 10 is nothing but 0.7, or translating into percentage, it is 70%. So as soon as I change it, one of them, for example, I make this as D. So you get only 6 out of 10. So hence it is 60%. So like this, you can actually calculate for what is the agreement. So if you go back to the formula, this is what I have, the first one, PAO, that's the initial figure. Now coming into the second one, it is a little bit of complication when it comes into how do we calculate PAE. Though I have built everything into this, I can go into a lot of details as well, but I made it very simple and easier to do it. So from this kind of table, what you need to do then is use a cross tab for coming out this. So cross tab or cross tabulation is the easiest way. So what I do is I simply use a pivot. I hope you all understand how to create pivots out of it. So pivots are nothing but doing a kind of cross tabulation. You can pick and choose which columns and rows that you want to use them for. So that's the, I would say, easiest way for achieving this. So what I have on this is on this axis it is coder A, and on this is nothing but coder B. And this is a cross tabulation between each of them of what they've given the scores of 1, 2, and 3. So this talks about, if I say 1 and 1, so that means coder A has given 1 as well as coder B has given 1. So both have given 1 on what 2 of the items or 2 of the units. So if you go back and simply do it, for example, coder A, on how many of them has he given 1? And similarly, coder B, on how many of these has he given 1? So there are total is 2. Okay, that's what this represents. So it's nothing but making use of the same data and putting it into a cross tabulation wherein we identify. So how we have to read this is coder A1, coder B1, there are 2 instances. But if I see coder A1 and coder B given 2, there is nothing, 0. Okay, total number of units or total number of papers are 10 here. If I make a change here, I just need to refresh this pivot table. It will give the results. Okay, so even if I make changes, it doesn't affect. So what is the next step then? I've got these numbers. Okay, then I come into the calculations in order to understand. I'm not sure if I'm complicating this across, but if you want, I can share this Excel file for you to, understand about how this is being calculated, and if you want to use it as part of your study in order to calculate the Cohen's Kappa. But if you're using certain softwares, it does have this calculation done for you as well. Like I used certain techniques and wherein I had to feed in the data and I got some results, but that was for a different perspective altogether different. So I've used the means and approach in order to do a qualitative, then coming up with the results. So that software did have the capability in order to calculate the Cohen's Kappa as well. So wherein what I need to do is I need to give this kind of inputs of identifying the coders A and coder B's data. And using this, just by this, they will then calculate and give the results by just giving this sort of information. The software does the calculation and provides it. But typically when you're working in this kind of environment, you may not get this. You're not working on any of the softwares which will give you the kind of so either you need to calculate it manually, or if you're familiar with any of the softwares, you can still do it. So here what then I do is I simply translate all of this into a form.
Excuse me, Raja.
Yeah, Professor.
We may skip these calculations. It's used only for the advanced user. So you can just complete the SLR part.
Correct.
We may skip that.
Okay. Okay, perfect. Yeah, I'm through with this. I'm just at the last slide. So this is how the, so typically what I'll very briefly do it in the next 1 minute and I'll close this. So this is how you do for the product and sum, and you do the calculations based upon what we have in this cross tab or cross tabulation. You determine each one of them and then you come up with a calculation for the results of Cohen's Kappa. And that's how it's being calculated for. So this has to be quoted in the paper, stating that depending upon the number of coders that has been involved as part of this research of the study, and this is the Cohen's Kappa. And there are similar to what we see with respect to the kind of quantitative analysis that we do. For example, if we say what should be the reliability, what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. Similarly, there are ranges associated with Cohen's Kappa as well. And using that range, you can state whether it is acceptable or not. 0.56 is quite low. So the acceptability of this also varies. So you can't simply quote a Cohen's Kappa and say that is the inter-rater agreement of Cohen's Kappa is this. So they will simply see this value. If it is too low, they'll simply reject it. So please make sure that you are having that kind of range. The range is typically available for, so that's not a difficult one. So if you want, I can provide that range as well. What is acceptable value and what is not. So with that, you could quote it appropriately. That's all I have. I'm through with my presentation for today. I think I've taken a full 1.5 hours just for explaining on this. I just had how many 8, 9 slides.
But that's
okay, so Professor, do we break for?